Hello, I'm James Barth, and today I'd like to tell you about our rock hard 4x4 skid plate system that we make for the JLs and the JT trucks. Now, there's a little bit of motor mount differences between the 4-cylinder and the 6-cylinder and the Gladiator trucks, and so we have a bracket change that we'll show you between the different ones, but the skid plate system is pretty much the same throughout all of them. It's available in 1/4-inch aluminum and 3/16 steel. Now, a couple of the things that set our skid plate system apart from others. When we originally were designing the skid plate system for the JL over the JK that we've been building since 2007, we ran into a couple problems, and one is the distance between the front axle or the front of the oil pan to where the crossmember is with the new 8-speed transmission. It moved the crossmember further back in the Jeep, this making what we would originally have as the oil pan skid longer. When we originally built this, we designed it with that oil pan skid longer, and we went out and did quite a bit of testing, and we weren't able to get the strength that we needed to give you an adequate system with that. So what we did is we went back and sat down and we re-engineered the skid plate system to what we've come with now, which has these dual crossmember systems in it. So what we've added is, if you look right here, we've added this 1-inch by 2-inch solid steel piece of crossmember, not a tube, but a solid piece of steel. We've machined it and drilled it and tapped it where needed, and this has allowed us to get the bracing that we need so that we can give you the strength that we need. The oil pan skid is now shorter, and then we have this full belly pan that goes across the complete center of your Jeep, this making a coverage far superior than anybody else in the industry and what you are needing on your Jeep. Then you have a resonator skid and your fuel tank skid. They're available for your 4-cylinder Jeep, your 6-cylinder, 2-door, and 4-door, and Gladiator truck. Now on the 4-cylinder skids, there is an additional skid that goes right here that it covers that big battery pack area that you have underneath. It's right out in the open, and if you put your Jeep over a big boulder, you're going to be knocking into that battery system. We don't want that to happen, so we built this skid plate system. We're going to go ahead and show you how to install this on each of your vehicles. We're going to show you how to install your skid plate system from Rock Hard 4x4 on your Jeep JT Gladiator here. Now, we have it up in the air so that we can show you and get you some pictures from better angles. This can be done on the ground. We're going to remove this crossmember here along with this transfer case factory skid. The transmission crossmember, the main crossmember, does stay in the vehicle. We are going to remove this little T crossmember in front of it also. We'll go ahead and do that now using an 18mm socket. Now that we've removed the cross members out of the way, we're going to go ahead and start off by installing the motor mount bracket on the left-hand side, the driver's side, that will go to our arm that comes down to the oil pan skid. This is identifying it with the 2 holes in the single. We're going to put it on the factory bolts up here and install the nuts. We're going to leave all hardware finger tight until we finish the install. You're going to identify the driver's side bracket with the straight bend line goes towards the motor mount side. Put the bolt and put the nut on the top side. You're going to go ahead and install the passenger side bracket on the frame with the bolt closest to the motor. Now that we've hung the brackets coming down from the motor mount, we're going to go ahead and put 1 bolt in the center of this belly pan skid and hang it from the cross member. This will allow us to slip the big cross member in from the back, which is the one that is machined for the gas tank, and the one from the front. As we do this cross member, you're going to go ahead and bring it up here, line it up with the fuel tank skid, bring it up. Look at your front belly pan skid. You'll see that we have the two outer bolts, and we have these two here where the oil pan skid and where this bolts into the cross member. The bolt pattern is shifted to the passenger side. So when you bring your cross member up, make sure you have it oriented accordingly. When you're doing this on a hoist, make sure that you allow enough room on your hoist of where you rack it to get this cross member in place. And start your outer bolts on each side with a tapered washer on them. On the passenger side, you're going to put a spacer in between the cross member and the plate. Go ahead and install the silver bolt with the taper head protector, and go ahead and just start this into the frame. Leave everything loose. You want to make sure that you leave all bolts loose until we've completed the install. Now we're going to go ahead and take two additional center cross member support bolts and go ahead and install them with tapered washers. These are also the black bolts that are included in your hardware kits. Now we're going to go ahead and start with the actual oil pan skid of this installation. You're going to identify two 1/2 inch by approximately around 1 1/4 inch long bolts and two tapered head protectors. You're going to go ahead and put the protectors on. You're going to grab the oil pan skid. You're going to hold that up in place on the cross member here and install the bolts. Be sure to leave everything loose. Because we've left our motor mount brackets, this arms coming down from the motor mounting area, from the frame, loose, we can move them around. They go on the inside of the skid. You want to line them up, push it up, and then put a bolt in to hold it in place. Then go ahead and install the nuts on the inside. Bring your resonator skid up in place. Go ahead and slide the tab in between the belly pan skid and the back cross member. A little pro tip is if you put this bolt in, it makes it easier to rotate. Make sure you're leaving all hardware loose. Go ahead and install the back bolt into the frame rail also. Nice thing about the JT platform is the Jeep, when they build it, put a lot of nut inserts inside the frame. So we utilize this so you're not having to drill and or tap the frame or anything like that. It's already there. Now we're going to go ahead and install the resonator bracket. This goes into a bolt that is already in the side of in the frame there. You're going to go ahead and start that bolt and then bring this bolt over to here, put it through the bracket, and put the lock nut on the back side. Once again, leaving all hardware loose until we finish the install. One thing to remember is we do not remove the factory fuel tank skid. This is a hanger for your fuel tank. Now we're going to use an 18mm socket and remove these three mounting bolts for the fuel tank. This will allow us to move our fuel tank skid in place. Now we're going to go ahead and install the fuel tank skid. A little pro tip is to slide the fuel tank in between the cross member and the belly pan and then install the rear bolt. This will hold it in place. Now, go ahead and reinstall the other two bolts on this side. Now, we're going to go ahead and remove this bolt here. This is on the carrier bearing for the drive shaft. Uses a 16mm socket, and go ahead and remove it. Go ahead and take the brace, which is the shorter of the braces left over, put the bolt in place, and go ahead and reinstall the bolt, making sure to leave all hardware loose. Now we will install the lower bolt and nut here. Now we're going to go ahead and use an 18mm socket and remove this mounting bolt here on the fuel tank. Next is identify the last bracket that we have in the hardware. You'll have a nut that is welded on the inside that goes down and a bracket towards the top. Go ahead and install this bracket. We will use the factory bolt on the top, and then we will install a bolt from the bottom into the weld nut, leaving all hardware loose. Now, in your hardware kit, you're going to find two black washers. One goes right here as a spacer, and one right over here as a spacer. Now, you're going to take, there's 3 carriage bolts that are left over. 2 larger ones that go on the outside with the nut on the top. The smaller one in the center. And the other larger one here. Now we're going to go ahead and install this skid plate. This goes on the driver's side off of the suspension bolt here. Now, it helps protect the exhaust. One thing to keep in mind is if you have a suspension that allows a lot of dropout, don't necessarily run this skid if you're concerned about clearance. We're going to go ahead and remove the nut on the control arm. This will allow this to slip on. Then we will take this nut plate, put it on the inside of the oil pan skid, and thread the bolts up from the bottom. Now we've got every component installed. Everything is still loose. Now we're going to go ahead and start tightening each of the bolts. We're going to start at the cross members. Front and back cross members, you're going to tighten all the bolts on them first. Then you'll go to the resonator skid, the fuel tank skid, and your oil pan skid. Let's go ahead and tighten everything up and finish your install.